Good morning, dear St. Aldates. Another Friday comes. This week, Pete Gregg of 24/7 posted on Facebook that something is stirring in the UK. He went on to list things he sees as answers to prayers that many of us have been praying for years, if not decades. The UK Blessing Song, viewed 2.1 million times. A huge surge of people turning to prayer who wouldn't normally pray, from research carried out by Tear Fund. Record numbers of people attending online church, and even the media beginning to reference these things. And he ends his post like this: "My friends, this is the time to pray with greater faith." But we're so often filled with doubts about our prayers. Does God really hear them, or do they bounce off the ceiling or evaporate into the atmosphere? Are they any good? Are they good enough for God? Last week we were thinking about the verse in Psalm 141, "May my prayer be set before you like incense," which has been beautifully set to music by Hillsong. May my prayer like incense rise before you. And we looked at a passage in Revelation 8, the first few verses, because I believe that there, among other places, we find some answers to our fears about what God may think of our prayers. First, we saw that our prayers are precious to God. And this week, I want to encourage you again from this passage, which tells us that our prayers are also fragrant to God. They're like pleasing perfume. Verses 3 and 4 say, "The angel was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints. The smoke of the incense, together with the prayers of the saints, went up before God." So it's as if our prayers, the prayers of all the saints, are carried up to God in incense. Well, of course, fragrance has powerful associations. Some years ago, I found myself tuning into the last of a Radio 4 series on the senses, which was about the power of smell and how it recalls sights and sounds, because there's a physiological connection between our sense of smell and our memory. I'm sure most of us have had the experience of bending to inhale the scent of some beautiful flower and saying, "Oh, that really takes me back to whatever or wherever it may be." Indeed, French author Marcel Proust's epic novel In Search of Lost Time opens with a scene in which different aromas awaken memories from the past, which leads into the topic of the book. The olfactory bulb, otherwise known as the smell nerve, connects directly to the brain's emotional centers, including memory. In her autobiography, Jo Malone, the perfumer, describes many times the complexity of the perfumer's work and the power of perfume, how it invades everything, just like the gospel story of Mary of Bethany breaking over the alabaster jar of perfume which filled the house with its fragrance. She recounts, Jo Malone that is, how she fell in love with fragrance when she visited Grasse in the south of France, which is apparently the world's perfume capital. And she described her visit as a spiritual experience and spoke of the transporting effect of fragrance. We first read about incense in the Bible in Exodus chapter 30. The Lord said to Moses, "Take fragrant spices, gum resin, onycha, and galbanum, and pure frankincense, all in equal amounts, and make a fragrant blend of incense, the work of a perfumer. It is to be salted and pure and sacred." All these ingredients have meaning. They contain healing properties as well as fragrances. Interestingly, while we may often think of fragrance as always being sweet, the holy incense had a bitter smell. If you've ever smelt the frankincense, you'll know that. In the context of our prayers going up in the smoke of the incense, we can recognize that many of our prayers will reflect bitter experiences, but they are still fragrant. I suppose many of us would be familiar too with the experience of our prayers being far from articulate, especially when they come from a place of pain. This is difficult if being articulate is something we prize or practice in our work and relationships. But when we don't know how to pray, Romans 8:26 tells us that the Spirit helps us. The Spirit helps us in our weakness. We don't know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us with groans that words cannot express. In the same way, Hebrews 5, verse 7, tells us that Jesus himself offered up prayers and petitions with loud cries and tears to the one who could save him from death. If Jesus, who was made in human likeness and therefore completely identified with the human experience, could express this level of pain and desperation in his prayers, surely we can too. Often, of course, our prayers are a sacrifice. They're hard to pray, maybe because we're waiting a long time for an answer. Or perhaps we're finding it very hard to forgive. Or perhaps we're distracted by pain of one kind or another. But all the same, whatever the reason for our bitterness or our pain, our prayers are a sweet aroma to the Lord. They are pleasing to him as well as precious. And in this text in Revelation, they rise from a golden altar, which serves to underline these truths. It's really as if the prayers of the saints, and so all of our prayers, go up to God wrapped in an envelope of perfumed incense. They are a fragrance to God. So this week, as you persevere in prayer and you hold on to hope, remember this. Whatever longing or disappointment or pain your prayers may contain, to your Heavenly Father, they are full of fragrance. Have a good Friday. Bye-bye.